He stole my Super Bowl tickets and thought I wouldn't find out. But when I did, I didn't scream. I made sure he lost his biggest client and his reputation, all without raising my voice. If you've ever been betrayed by someone in power and dreamed of the perfect comeback, this story is for you. Hit subscribe, like this video, and let's dive into a masterclass in silent revenge. My boss stole my Super Bowl tickets. That sentence played in a loop in my head like a broken chant, each repetition stoking the heat in my chest. But before that moment, before betrayal tasted like bile in the back of my throat, I was just Camille, a 33-year-old consultant with cracked heels, a closet full of neutral blazers, and a sacred obsession with the 49ers. It started 3 months before the Super Bowl, during one of those corporate marathons where I had to fly out, present reports, wine and dine a high-value client, and still send off a status update before midnight. My client, Warren Grant, was different though, sharp but human. He liked me. Not in the sleazy way some of the older executives did, but in the "I'd trust your brain and I'd call you a friend" way. We bonded over things no spreadsheet could capture: underdog stories, burnt espresso, and our shared worship of the red and gold. When the 49ers clinched their playoff win, Warren and I hugged like war veterans in a hotel lounge. He told me, "If we go to the Super Bowl, I'll make sure you're there." I laughed it off. But I didn't forget. Not because I expected him to follow through, but because the hope lit something in me. Fast forward 3 weeks. A Tuesday morning. I'm in a beige meeting room filled with overpriced coffee and the smell of toner when Edward Lawrence, or as the assistants called him behind closed doors, Dickie, walked in with a smirk and a golf tan. Dickie was a senior partner at my firm. The type who thought charisma was a substitute for conscience. He spoke in buzzwords and name-dropped at parties, never once missing an opportunity to remind the room he was the youngest partner in our firm's history. He didn't like that clients preferred me. I was a reminder that hard work could outperform wine-soaked networking. At the time, I didn't know it yet, but Warren had already made good on his promise. He had handed 2 Super Bowl tickets, 30-yard line seats, to Dickie, with clear instructions that they were a gift for me. And I never received them. The day of the Super Bowl, I sat on my thrifted couch, wearing my lucky jersey and nursing cheap beer, watching my team lose on TV while a stranger sat in the seat meant for me. I didn't find out until a week later. Warren and I were out for drinks again. He asked casually, "So how was it?" "The seats were pretty killer, huh?" I blinked. "The what?" "The game, Camille. You were there, right? I gave the tickets to Edward to surprise you." "You didn't go?" My heart dropped. I remember the sound of the glass in my hand hitting the table. I remember the sudden clarity, a feeling like ice water poured down my spine. I looked Warren in the eye and said, "I didn't get anything." I had no idea. He went still. "You're joking." I wasn't. But I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I nodded slowly, shoulders stiff. "I'll ask around." That night, I didn't sleep. My thoughts were a frantic mess of questions. Who got the tickets? Why didn't Dickie tell me? Was this revenge for outperforming him? Or just petty greed? The next morning, I walked into the office like nothing had happened, except I walked straight to Amanda, the executive assistant who knew everything before it happened. I asked softly, "Did Edward give away Super Bowl tickets recently?" She looked at me, and something in her eyes changed. "He gave them to Paul Remington. One of his clients. Said it was a corporate thank you." Paul Remington. A man who worked in industrial logistics, zero overlap with Warren's firm. It all clicked. He stole my gift. He handed it off to score brownie points with someone who couldn't even spell touchdown. And I could have gone nuclear. I could have stormed into his office, slammed a folder on his desk, and demanded answers. But that would make me the angry woman. The hysterical subordinate. The overreactor. No. This needed more than rage. It needed precision. So I texted Warren. Hey. Thank you again for the thought. Just learned the tickets were given to another client. Apparently, from the firm. He replied in seconds. All caps. Are you shitting me? Pretend I never told you. Let me handle this. And just like that, the game shifted. The ball was no longer in Dickie's court. It was in mine. After I sent that text to Warren and read his furious response, I felt the tension leave my body like air from a balloon. Not because I had one, far from it, but because now I wasn't alone. Now I had someone who mattered, someone with power, on my side. And he wasn't just angry. He was surgical. Warren didn't rage. He planned. Over the next few days, I worked like nothing had happened. I still presented in meetings, still handed in deliverables, still smiled politely when Dickie sauntered through the floor like a conquering Roman. But inside, every smile was a clenched fist. Every good morning was a silent scream. Warren reached out again midweek. I've got a plan. You just need to act surprised. That's all he said. I trusted him. Because the thing about people like Warren? They've played chess long enough to know that checkmate doesn't come from a loud move, it comes from the silent shift of a pawn at the right moment. 3 days later, my calendar pinged. A meeting request from Warren's office. Routine enough. Nothing unusual, except for one detail, it was scheduled to include Dickie. That was odd. Dickie rarely attended in-person client meetings unless there were cocktails or contracts involved. I accepted without hesitation. The flight was booked by our firm's travel desk. Dickie insisted we fly together, probably a PR move to look partnered in front of the client. I played along. On the plane, he made small talk about upcoming client dinners, new acquisition rumors, and even a joke about his golf game. I heard you're a Niners nut, he said between sips of ginger ale. Tough loss, huh? I looked him in the eye. Smiled. Yeah. Tough. If he saw anything in my face, he didn't react. Either he really thought I hadn't found out, or he was betting I wouldn't do anything about it. We arrived at Warren's office just after lunch. The receptionist greeted us warmly, and I could feel Dickie straighten up, like he always did when the air smelled expensive. The conference room was already filled when we walked in. Warren was there, of course, seated at the head of the table. A few of his lieutenants, people I recognized from our quarterly updates. But then, someone new. A woman in her 30s. Smartly dressed. Poised. She looked at us and smiled like she'd been waiting for this moment. Warren stood. Edward, Camille, good to see you. Before we start, let me introduce Stephanie such and such, VP of Operations from our procurement wing. She wanted to sit in on this. I nodded politely. Stephanie reached out to shake my hand. Nice to see you again. Or wait, did we meet at the Super Bowl? The room fell silent. I tilted my head, confused. I'm sorry? She laughed. You were in the seats next to mine, right? At the game? Warren leaned forward with a smirk. Geez, Steph. How much champagne did you have? They were sitting right next to you. I blinked. Then I looked right at him. Warren. I wasn't at the game. Dickie coughed. His hand fidgeted with the Mont Blanc pen in his pocket. Stephanie turned toward me. Wait. You weren't there? But those were the company seats. I was told, she turned to Warren. You gave those to Camille, right? Warren didn't break eye contact. I did. Now the oxygen had vanished from the room. Stephanie continued, so, who was in the other seats? That logistics guy, what's his name, Remington. She snapped her fingers, pretending to search for the name. Paul Remington, I added, watching Dickie start to squirm. Stephanie smiled. Right. But, what business do we have with him again? Are we doing something with industrial shipping now? That's when Dickie broke. Oh, well, Camille couldn't make it, so I figured. You figured what? Warren asked, his voice flat. That you'd reassign a personal gift meant for my account lead to someone who isn't even involved with our company? Dickie's mouth opened and closed. His face turned pink, then crimson. There must have been a mix-up at the office. Warren slammed his leather folio shut. This meeting is over. Everyone froze. Warren stood. Camille, I think I owe you a thank you lunch. Stephanie, feel like joining? Dickie tried to rise with us. Maybe I can. Stephanie cut him off. I don't think that's a good idea. She turned to the assistant by the door. Please make sure Mr. Lawrence gets a car back to the airport. We left him there, alone in a room that suddenly felt like a cage. As the elevator doors closed, I heard Warren chuckle. God, he looked like he was going to vomit. I laughed for the first time in days. Stephanie turned out to be just a junior coordinator Warren had recruited for the show. But her acting was flawless. She was a fellow Niners fan too. Over lunch, we toasted to justice with overpriced wine and steak I didn't have to pay for. 2 hours later, I got a message from Dickie. We need to talk. Please. You can't tell the partners. We need to cover for the firm. I stared at it, then smiled. Not yet. Let him sweat. I didn't respond to Dickie's message that day. Not even a courtesy acknowledgement. I let it sit, unread, glowing with desperation on my locked screen. I wanted him to feel every hour tick by, wondering what I'd say, if I'd rat him out, if I was already whispering in boardrooms and forwarding emails. Instead, I went home, drew myself a hot bath, and allowed the silence to hum. There's a kind of power in not responding. A psychological chokehold. When someone is used to controlling the narrative, silence becomes their loudest enemy. The next morning, my inbox held 2 more messages from Dickie. 1, a plea thinly veiled as professionalism. Hey Camille, let's regroup and ensure we're aligned on how to handle this with Warren's team. Let's protect our reputation. The second was shorter. Please don't blow this up. We can fix it. Fix what? You don't fix stolen tickets. You don't fix betrayal. But I didn't type that. I didn't type anything. I waited. Warren texted me a little after noon. Ready to hit him where it hurts? I texted back, say the word. That afternoon, my phone buzzed with a screenshot. An email addressed to Dickie from Warren's assistant. The subject line was brutal in its elegance. Formal request for financial restitution and apology. Inside, a neatly written demand. 1. Full reimbursement for the secondary market value of the Super Bowl tickets, documented resale value over $10,200. 2. Coverage of the lunch tab for all attendees that day, nearly $1,300 after tip, courtesy of an intentionally decadent restaurant selection. 3. A personal written apology to me, Camille Marie Delaney, for the theft of my gift and subsequent deception. 4. A formal apology letter to Warren's company for unethical behavior by a partner of our firm, with an acknowledgement that the seats were intended for me. 5. A restriction on future contact. Warren would only interact with me or another partner, but never again with Dickie. And at the end, failure to meet these terms within 5 business days will result in immediate termination of our engagement with your firm. It was corporate. Cold. Lethal. Warren didn't yell. He filed the equivalent of a ceasefire demand before war. And it worked. Within hours, chaos bubbled beneath the surface of our firm like a volcano. I received a ping from Jenna, one of the executive assistants. You just made the partners call an emergency meeting. You okay? I replied, I'm perfect. By 4 p.m., I was summoned. Not by Dickie. By the partners. 5 of them. All older, seasoned, calculating. They sat around the same polished walnut table where I once begged for a promotion that took 2 years too long. One of them, Marta, the only woman in the group, started. Camille, thank you for coming. We've been made aware of an issue concerning client Grant's Super Bowl tickets. I nodded. You were not informed they were intended for you, correct? Correct. And you didn't attend? I did not. Did you, perhaps, give them to someone else? They were trying to verify Dickie's cover story. I looked her in the eye. No. I never received them. Warren told me last week he had given them to Edward with instructions that they were for me. Silence. Another partner spoke up. And you didn't escalate this? I trusted Warren to handle it. But I'm assuming you've seen his demands? They had. And they were panicking. Because losing Warren's company meant losing a client responsible for $4.3 million annually in revenue. But more than that, it meant losing status. Warren's brand was a magnet. Where he went, others followed. Camille, Marta said carefully, we're concerned. This whole situation is, well, unfortunate. We want to make it right. We're prepared to meet Warren's conditions. We just need to smooth this over internally. Smooth what over? I asked. Another pause. This one thicker than the last. We're discussing appropriate internal consequences. Translation, they were about to eat Dickie alive in the next room. I stood. Let me know how it goes. And for the record, I didn't ask Warren to do any of this. Marta's face hardened. That's why you'll go far here. I left the room walking tall, head high, heart hammering. I didn't look back. That night, I finally opened Dickie's last message. Please let's talk. I'll fix this. You know I respect you. Don't ruin me over this. I replied one word. Invoice. He didn't answer. But I later found out that the partners forced him to pay back every dime personally. Not from a corporate expense account. From his own salary. Over $11,500 in penalties, extracted not for ethics, but to stop the bleeding. He also lost Warren's account and all the future revenue it represented. That meant a major chunk of his profit share vanished like smoke. The client was reassigned. To another partner. Not me. But still, the symbolism was delicious. Dickie was no longer the face of anything. He was the stain they were trying to scrub out of view. And he knew it. The days that followed felt odd. Not triumphant, not euphoric, just still. Like I had finally walked out of a hurricane and was standing in the eerie quiet afterward. No alarms. No storm. Just the soft hum of dignity slowly being restored. There were whispers in the office. Dickie was taking time off to focus on client transitions. But everyone knew. You could taste the scandal in the air, like bitter coffee left on a burner too long. He walked past my desk one afternoon, slower than usual, suit still crisp but the swagger gone. He didn't meet my eyes. Just kept walking. I didn't smirk. I didn't gloat. Because real power doesn't posture. Real power doesn't need an audience. What I had done wasn't about vengeance anymore. It was about reclaiming space, my space, in a world that so often gave the best seats to the worst men. Still, the partners tried to patch it up. They offered me little peace offerings, more visibility, a small bump in my quarterly bonus, vague promises about reviewing promotion timelines. But they never apologized. Not one of them. I knew what they were doing. They were treating me like a PR fire. Trying to contain me, to keep the firm's image intact. To make sure no article in Forbes or Business Insider ever said, consulting partner steals Super Bowl tickets from female rising star. And honestly, that was fine. Because what they didn't know, what no one knew yet, was that I was already halfway out the door. While Dickie was busy spinning excuses and the partners were doing damage control, I was taking meetings. Coffee chats. Just catching up Zoom calls. Recruiters were circling like sharks that smelled blood. And I knew my value now. Not just in dollar signs, but in loyalty. In quiet influence. Because the moment Warren cut ties with Dickie, 3 more clients noticed and reached out to me directly. "Camille, are you still with them? Because if you move..." They didn't finish the sentence. They didn't have to. One of them, a CEO I had helped land a $7 million expansion deal the year before, called me personally. "I don't care where you land," he said. "Wherever it is, that's where I'm moving our account." It was the corporate version of a marriage proposal. Suddenly, I wasn't just someone who got tickets stolen. I was someone people wanted to follow. By the end of that month, I had 3 competing offers, all for better titles, more pay, and above all, autonomy. One of them, from a boutique firm led by a female founder, came with an equity stake. And the best part? They had no partners like Dickie. When I handed in my resignation, the partners tried to act surprised. "Camille, this feels abrupt. Can we ask what prompted the decision?" I smiled. "Just time for the next thing." Marta stood up and followed me into the hallway. "We're going to miss you. Truly. We hope you know this wasn't personal." But it was. It always is. Because when you steal from someone, when you lie to their face, when you decide their hard work is disposable, that's personal. I shook her hand. "Thanks for everything." And I meant it. Not out of warmth, but out of grace. As I packed up my office, I got one last email from Warren. "Proud of you. Lunch when you're free. Oh, and if we ever get back to the bowl, I'm flying you first class. No middlemen." I laughed. Finally, the seat that was always meant for me. But what stayed with me most, more than the fallout, more than the job offers, more than the empty stare in Dickie's eyes, was what silence had taught me. There's a kind of revenge that screams. And there's a kind that echoes louder because it never had to. Mine didn't make headlines. It just made a man irrelevant. And sometimes, that's the cruelest justice of all. 6 weeks after I walked out of the firm, I found myself in an entirely different city, sitting in a glass-walled corner office that looked down on the skyline like it belonged to someone who made empires move. Because now, I did. The boutique firm that hired me? They didn't just give me a title. They gave me room to build. And I didn't waste a second. By the second month, 3 of my former firm's biggest accounts had transitioned quietly under my new leadership. No press. No press releases. Just the unmistakable sound of power shifting hands, one signed contract at a time. Dickie never stood a chance. He remained at the firm, technically. But after losing Warren and the 3 follow-up accounts that were once under my influence, he was dead weight. A partner with no portfolio. His name still sat on the website's leadership page, but even that felt more like an obituary than a bio. I heard through the grapevine that he was trying to rebuild his reputation. Speaking at second-tier conferences. Offering free consultations to tech startups desperate for validation. But reputation is like a wine glass. Once shattered, even if you glue it back together, no one really wants to drink from it. Me? I had moved on. Warren introduced me to two other execs in his circle, one of whom ran a sports tech firm poised to IPO. They asked me to lead a 6-month strategic positioning project. I said yes. That deal alone brought in more revenue than I earned in my last year under Dickie's partnership. Stephanie, yes, that's Stephanie, and I kept in touch too. She ended up leaving Warren's company a few months later and joined a different department at another firm. We still joked about the meeting, as we started calling it. She sent me a bobblehead of a football player in a blazer with a post-it note that read, 30-yard line justice. I kept it on my new desk. A reminder of what happens when you trust your instincts. Of what happens when you stay silent just long enough to let the truth speak. But most of all, of what it means to know your worth. Because that's the real revenge, isn't it? Not the invoices. Not the public embarrassment. Not the dethroning of a man who thought he could play God with someone's hard-earned gift. It's walking into every room, every boardroom, every meeting, knowing that you earned your place there. That you didn't beg. That you didn't bow. That you saw the game for what it was, and played it better. I still haven't gone to a Super Bowl. But I no longer need the validation of a ticket stub to know I belong. Every time I sit at the head of a table, every time a CEO asks my opinion, every time a client follows me instead of a name on a plaque, I know. This is my 30-yard line. And I earned every inch of it. So if you're out there, stuck under someone like Dickie, questioning if it's worth it, if you should just let it go, remember this. They may steal your seat. But they can't steal your power. Unless you give it to them. And when you finally stop waiting for permission to claim what's yours, you'll realize the real Super Bowl isn't on a screen. It's the life you build with hands that never stopped fighting. And in that arena, you're already the champion.